Hello and welcome to GEO 2047 Political Geography. I am Nick McGorran, I am the module leader. Thank you for taking this module. I hope that you'll find it interesting and important. I myself am a political geographer. My research is mostly on international boundaries in Central Asia. And since I was a small boy, I've loved political geography. I used to sit in a French lesson, I remember, drawing maps of the world from memory as all the conjugation of verbs was just flying over my head. And I love researching and teaching political geography. And I really hope that you will enjoy this module too. Now, of course, this year we are online. I'm not going to go on and on in this module about COVID and about having to do everything online. There's lots of talk that these times are unprecedented. It's a word the university management use a lot. And of course, in our lifetime they are. But in human history, they are not. Human history we've gone through wars and epidemics and catastrophes repeatedly, and we've had to study and learn throughout those. You may be wondering why there are videos of Narnia and Lord of the Rings playing in the background. Narnia was written by C.S. Lewis and Lord of the Rings by his friend J.R.R. Tolkien. But both of them were lecturers in English during the Second World War, and they wrote some very interesting things about how study can take place in wartime. And I gave a Newcastle University public lecture on this topic, and the link is on the Canvas page. I'd encourage you to read, to look at that if you like. But the basic point they make is study has always taken place under the threat of things greater than ourselves. There is no such thing as normal. It's not about waiting to get back to usual times. This is what it is, and we make the most of it. So it's not a question of just managing. It's a question of hoping you'll have a really great university study experience this year. We'll try our hardest. The teaching team is myself and Alison Williams and Matt Benwell and Craig Jones, and we're all enthusiastic about political geography. We're all trying to get our heads around using all this new technology. So be patient with us, please, if we struggle to get on top of it at first. But although the mode of delivery has changed, the purpose of university hasn't changed. The statutes of our university say the object of the university is for the public benefit to advance education, learning and research. And that hasn't changed. This week's theme is the foundations of political geography. Basically, it's where we are at today. I hope you'll find this lecture and the lecture next week, which follows it up, interesting, exciting and fun. We're going to visit some interesting places in Tyneside. We're going to look at some really interesting people, grapple with some important ideas and try making a potion that enables us to travel backwards in time. So let's see how it all goes. And in this first video for this week's theme, I'm going to ask, what is political geography? Political geography is, as I said in the first year lectures last year, for those of you who did Interconnected World, it's getting behind the map. It's taking the world map that we're used to seeing and looking at it and ask, how was that map made? What does it conceal? What does it reveal? And in this first part, we're going to get out into a few places into the world and a few places in Tyneside to explore how the module is structured. In AD 43, Rome conquered Britain, and the following century, the Emperor Hadrian came and decided to build a wall, as his biographer put it, to separate Rome from the barbarians. And it's here in Wall's End where I've come now to introduce the first part of this module, space and sovereignty. So as you'll see coming up behind me is a reconstruction of the Roman wall at the wonderful museum of Segedunum, and the Tyne and Wears Museum have opened it specially for me to record this film for you. But down behind me now you can also see the original stones this is the original section of the Roman wall, and I'd encourage you when you can to come out here. So this was not a boundary in the modern sense of the word. There's a big difference between these walls and modern international boundaries, but it's still a division created to try and protect Roman Britain from the Scottish tribes to the north of this border. And in this part of the module, Space and Sovereignty, we'll be looking at how the modern system of nation states came about, how international boundaries and borders are made, what it looks like to make boundaries in the high seas, maritime boundaries, how the modern state system was created and how that was spread across the world, and how this affects indigenous populations whose claims to sovereignty are very different often to those that were spread through Western European imperialism, and who are still today struggling for rights and access to ancestral land. And I don't know if any of you know the music group, the Police, who were big in the 70s and 80s, and the lead singer Sting was from here in Wallsend, and he wrote my favourite of his songs was called All This Time, and in this song he says, the teachers told us the Romans built this place. They built a wall and a temple and an edge of the empire garrisoned town. They lived and they died, they prayed to their gods, but their stone gods did not make a sound, and their empire crumbled till all that was left was stones the workmen found. These stones here. And Sting's song is a reminder that the impressive divisions and boundaries and borders that we make aren't permanent, they're temporary, and that the modern map of the world, nation states, has changed a lot in our time, and it's changing, and it's changed in my lifetime and your lifetime. It will keep changing, and we'll look at some of the drivers of these changes, how the state system came about in the first place, but also things that are undermining it and challenging it. The rise of transnational corporations, of bodies like the European Union and the United Nations, which limit state sovereignty from above, international business capitalism, and challenges from below from activists. And of course, standing here in what was the Roman division between Britain and Scotland is a reminder that there is still a significant movement for independence north of the present boundary between England and Scotland, and it's likely that it's possible that in our lifetime that Scotland will become an independent state again. So this system of states and nations that we've created is subject to constant change and constant challenge, and it's that we'll be exploring in this first part of the module. So if the first part of our module looks at how the modern world map of states has been made, then the second part moves globally, and it asks, how do these states relate to each other in an international sphere? And the word we use for that in geography is geopolitics. And the place I've come to think about that is here by the Sage Gateshead, looking down onto the River Tyne. There's the Millennium Bridge, and behind me you can see the the Royal Naval Base, training base here. And normally there'd be HMS Calliope, the Royal Navy's training vessel, moored here on the Tyne, but it's not in at the moment. There's been a Royal Naval vessel called HMS Calliope moored here in the Tyne since 1905. It's been a training vessel, and 1905 was the year that one of the great founding fathers of modern geography and of geopolitics, Halford Mackinder, wrote a famous piece where he coined the term manpower and argued that Britain needed to increase its social provision of housing and education to raise up recruits to man the Royal Navy and the British Army to help strengthen and build the British Empire overseas. And it's a reminder that geography, and British geography, has been very much implicated in Britain's geopolitical projects. At the time Mackinder was writing, in 1904 and 1905, the Royal Navy was protecting and helping widen the British Empire across the world. So geopolitics is about, if you like, this raw fact of military strength, but it's also about more than that. It's about the ways in which we view the world and imagine the world as a certain type of place, occupied by certain types of people, characterized by certain types of dramas. And that's the module, that's what we'll look at in the second part of this module. How do we think of states as connected in the international sphere? But not simply about states. We'll think about popular geopolitics, the role of film and popular culture in creating these images and views we have of the world that have real effects on the world. We'll look at the war on terror, British and American foreign policy over the past 2 decades, and we'll look at resources and the argument that natural resources are increasingly driving geopolitics. And we'll finish with the question there about what does geopolitics look like in the Anthropocene age, in an age of climate change, of human-caused climate change and unprecedented threats to human survival because of that. So that's the second part of our module, geopolitics. But for the third part of our module, we'll go back to Newcastle University's campus and take a walk around there. So we've looked at the first 2 parts of the module. If in space and sovereignty we're looking at how states are made, and in geopolitics we're looking at how these states relate to each other in the international sphere, the third and final part of this module is asking the question about what it means to belong to or to be excluded from states and other political communities, and that is called citizenship. And for that section we've come back to campus, and we're behind the Armstrong building, and I'm standing next to the statue of Martin Luther King. So this statue was erected in 2017, and it's as you can see, I'm struggling to work out how to use a selfie stick. It's the first time I've used one, but this statue was erected to mark 50 years since Martin Luther King came to Newcastle University to give an honorary degree, and it's one of the great moments in our university's history. We're the only UK university to honour him in that way, and the statue is erected behind the Armstrong building, and you can see here I'm standing behind the King's Hall, and the idea is that when you graduate in a couple of years' time, after you've heard your graduation ceremony, we'll walk out past this statue, and the idea is that you'll be suitably impressed and inspired. And of course the key concern in King's life, the key political campaign, was the effective exclusion of African Americans from full citizenship in the United States. This meant not only that some were unable to register to vote, that they were, but in that sort of formal citizenship, they could get passports, sure, but citizenship is not about simply having a passport. It's about being able to participate in the life of the state. And African Americans in the 50s and 60s, in many places, they were not allowed to send their children to the same schools as white parents, which of course meant that the kids went to poorer schools. It also meant that they were not able to vote, that they were not able to take participation as political leaders and as opinion formers in the state. And so King's whole campaign was about trying to undo the exclusion of African Americans from citizenship. And as part of the civil rights movement, he had a lot of success in that, his campaign did, but still, as the Black Lives Matters movement has shown this year and more recently, African Americans remain excluded from full participation and equal benefits and equal access to resources and to advancement in the US state. And so the third part of our module looks at citizenship. What does it mean to belong to or to be excluded from full access and participation in the state in the first place? But it also looks at how citizens can organise to try and change things. So we're going to look at non-violence. We'll look at the way in which young people too can organise and use their voice to try and change society. So I hope you liked that brief tour of Tyneside and tour of this module. The module's about three things: space and sovereignty, geopolitics and citizenship. And these topics come together in an example like Brexit, for example. Firstly, it's about space and sovereignty. It's about how we draw borders, the question of who is in charge of making laws and controlling, for example, tariff regimes in a given territory. Secondly, it's about geopolitics. It's about Britain's place in the world. Who are we? Are we European? Are we more focused towards a transatlantic partnership and being global? Where do we belong in the world? And thirdly, it's about citizenship. Who belongs? Who has the right to move here? When people come here, what rights do they have to take part in the society of the United Kingdom? So, for example, European Union citizens could vote in certain UK elections. So this is the module, and political geography, if we can define it, is broadly the study of the intersection of space and power. The study of intersection of space and power. It's about how we divide the world up between ourselves, how we claim and control places, how we define them as yours or mine, and how we decide who is welcome to participate in a certain place and who isn't. Political geography is much in the news. At the time I record this lecture, if I think topics that have been on the news the last couple of days: fighting between Azerbaijani and Armenian forces over the disputed territorial exclave of Nagorno-Karabakh. This is about space and sovereignty. Who controls this land? It's about nationalism. We've seen COVID-19 protests. Many people protesting that about the government's untrammeled ability to simply say who can come and go, who can move, what we can do and what we can't do, without much democratic accountability. We've seen Italian dissatisfaction at the EU, and a poll showing increasing numbers of Italians want to leave the European Union. This is partially about COVID. The European Union didn't help Italy when the COVID outbreak occurred, but China did. China helped many countries with supplies at this time of fighting COVID-19, and it's part of China's so-called Belt and Road Initiative. It's trying to create transport and trade corridors across Europe, Asia and Africa. And this is a Chinese geopolitical ploy to try and gain more influence and power and balance itself against the United States across the world. This is about political geography. But one of the things that's been on my mind particularly this week is the so-called Chinese re-education camps in Xinjiang. China controls the western part of China is historically part of Central Asia. It's Muslim, and the Uyghur people have been subject to a brutal crackdown. 1 million people have been incarcerated in Chinese camps to re-educate them, to make them forget Islam and follow atheist communism. This is about citizenship, control of people, making them excluding them from equal access to the state and using state power to control those bodies and minds. So political geography is very much in the news. And if you find these examples interesting, the examples I've used so far in this lecture, then you'll like this module and you'll enjoy this module. If these don't engage you, then think about switching to a different module, because you'll find it uninteresting. So let's talk about how the module will work.
We have Richard Ryan with us today, and he's brought a Phantom Flex 4K camera. We're going to shoot at 1,000 frames per second of paint drying.
So the video I've shown you, and which will continue in the background, is a video about literally watching paint dry. And this part of the talk is possibly the least interesting. It's the boring but really important information about how the module works. So please do pay attention. It won't be very long, and you can consult the handbook online as well if you're interested. Each week on Monday, materials will be released for a different theme. Each week has a theme, And we will release videos, instruction videos, PowerPoints, for example, guided readings, videos for you to watch, activities for you to do. And different lecturers will do this in different ways because we all teach in different ways. And that's an advantage to you. You'll enjoy it more because of that. But we'll all release our materials on Monday morning. On the same day, we will open a discussion board for that theme, and that discussion board will be open for a fortnight. You can post questions you have to us on it, or you can send us questions by email, and we'll reply in different ways. We might reply online on the discussion board, or we might post a video, for example, summing up all the questions. So try and post them as those questions come in as you do the reading and activities. Each week on Friday, or at the end of the week, we hope we'll have a synchronous session. And this will be led by me as module leader. We'll use that session to discuss the week's theme, but also particularly to discuss political geography in the news that week, to discuss anything you've been reading. So it's an open question and answer and informal discussion. I'm hoping that this will take place at the end of the week. As I speak, they have not yet released the timetable. I got an email saying that the timetable will be released on Monday, which happens to be my birthday. So of course it's the best birthday present I could wish, being able to look at the university timetables. Actually, I just remembered, last year, one of my goddaughters sent me a joke on my birthday as a birthday present. Maybe I can share it with you, as it's a political geography joke. And the joke is this: what's the best thing about Switzerland? I don't know, but the flag is a big plus. Boom. Okay, hopefully my jokes will get better over the course of the year. So Monday, the materials for each week will have one theme. Monday, the materials will be released. Discussion boards to answer questions. By the end of the week, there'll be a synchronous session with me to reflect on the week. And that's basically how the module will run. What about the assessments? There are 2 assessments. In the first semester, the assessment is a letters to newspaper oral presentation. You will be asked to write a letter to a newspaper in response to an event, to an article in the paper that connects to this module. And then you'll have to create an oral presentation on PowerPoint. And that sounds demanding, but we'll explain it very, very clearly at the time. So don't worry about that. That's 40% of the module. And at the end of semester 2, there will be an essay, which will be 60% of the module mark. So how can you do well in this module? Firstly, keep reading the newspapers. You'll need this for assessment 1, but to illustrate your examples and to get the most out of the module, we really want you to connect it to the real world. So keep looking at the news. A good news source every day. Radio 4's Today programme in the morning is a good place to start, or a good quality newspaper. Follow the news every day and see how it links to this module. Secondly, make lecture notes. Don't just listen to us and look at these PowerPoints passively. You won't learn very well. Be active. For each lecture, make notes on a computer file if you have one, but if you're using your only screen to watch the videos, even better, buy a notebook, make detailed notes as we're speaking through it for each lecture. Be active in your learning. And finally, read the reading list. We'll give a guided readings some weeks to focus on particular activities, but each week there will be a reading list. You can find that on the Canvas web pages. Read a number of items for each week. Each week there'll be at least 2 that are really strongly recommended, so read those. Make sure you're reading as you go along. If you leave it for the assessments, you won't do as well. So that's the boring but important part. But I hope that I've emphasised that political geography is about understanding this extraordinary, varied world in which we live, how we divide the world up between ourselves and how we lay claim to space. It's about how we see ourselves in the world, that's geopolitics, and it's about how humans are excluded or included from belonging to political communities. These are such important and interesting topics, and we hope that you'll enjoy studying them and following them this year. And in the next of these videos, we'll ask, what is political geography for? Thank you for your attention.